Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show. Today, I have an incredible guest, somebody that I've been wanting to interview for a very long time. She's a connector, she's an international development leader. She's done so much in her life, and I'm just absolutely thrilled that she's actually now taken the time to put her life and her soul on paper with the release of her new book. So, Jennifer Erie is an author, international development leader, former USAID Foreign Service officer, a speaker, a creative entrepreneur. Over a career spanning more than 2 decades, she's worked across Africa, Asia, the Pacific, leading programs in global health, humanitarian response, youth development, and so much more. She's also the founder of Gen, a creative and cultural enterprise focused on storytelling, the arts, and social impact. So a packed resume. But today, we are here to talk about her debut memoir, The World in My Bones, The Diplomat Queens Made. It traces her journey from growing up in Queens, New York, as the daughter of Haitian immigrants to becoming a diplomat serving in countries like South Africa, where we met, South Sudan, Tanzania, Thailand, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines. And the memoir explores identity, leadership, grief, caregiving. Like I said, she really pours her soul on the page. And I personally really enjoyed reading about her journey of personal loss, celebrating culture, creativity, and the human connections that she's made along the way. So, Jennifer, welcome, welcome. I'm so thrilled that we finally get to have this conversation. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for having me, Mimi. I don't even know what else to say after that. You gave me such a great introduction, and I'm sitting here
Oh my
like, is that me? Is that really me?
Yeah, girl, you need to bask in it. You know, you've worked so hard, you've done so much for
Oh,
yourself
thank
and others. And I remember when we first met in South
you.
Africa, I mean, you
Yeah.
really are the connector extraordinaire in the sense that, you are the person, you're always
Mm,
building community. You're
right.
always, seeking to connect like-minded people. You're
Yeah, I
always
enjoy
kind
it.
of encouraging and pushing, especially women, to be their best selves. And I know that you've just gone through obviously a very major transition from the work that you're doing with USAID and
Yes.
now, being an author and doing something completely different.
Right.
And so my hope for you is that the community that you've built for other people is now surrounding you and putting its arm around you as well as you start on this brand new journey. And what a journey it's been. And I'd
Sure.
love for you, for those who haven't read the book, to give us just a little bit of a snippet of who you are, who's
Sure.
Jennifer,
Right.
and how did Queen make you?
Yes, thank you for that. And you're part of my community. I'm so, happy to have someone like you in my corner. So thank you for all the support and thanks for having me on today. But as you mentioned earlier, I introduced myself. I am the daughter of Haitian immigrant parents. I was born to Fritz and Jeanette Erie back in the 70s in Queens, New York, in Laurelton. And I, went through the world with these dual identities of being the daughter of immigrants, being American, and went through, my schooling all throughout the US, including at Syracuse University, American University. But then my world really got opened up wider in terms of where I come from, in terms of my roots in Africa, when I did a study abroad program in Zimbabwe back in the days in the 90s. And then also when I went to do Peace Corps in South Africa, also in the 90s. And so those experiences really helped open up my eyes to, what's possible and what's out there beyond my American upbringing. And then eventually I got to work for USAID, which then brought me even further, to Asia and other places. And along the way, I became a mother. I have a beautiful son, Anthony Caiso. As you mentioned, got into leadership roles at USAID. I became a caregiver to my own mother, who unfortunately passed away last year. And eventually now I'm an author. So, as you can see, my life hasn't really been this straight line. It's not linear. The path has not been linear, but I'm happy the way things are shaping out, and I've got some newfound freedom.
Absolutely. And life is not linear. And we thank goodness for that because,
Yeah,
I think it would be quite a boring journey if we knew exactly where we were going to end. But
that's
I'm a
right.
deep believer that everything starts at home. So I work in storytelling and I'm really
Yes.
passionate about the role of storytelling, not just in leadership, but
Yeah.
also in all aspects of life. I believe that the stories that we are told when we're younger,
Mm, yeah,
growing up, essentially start to form bit by bit the lens through which we see the world
for
and how
sure.
we operate in it. So, which
That's
is
right.
why I think that parenting is one of the most sacred jobs, in the
That's
world.
right.
And so, what were some of the stories that you think growing up you heard around the dinner table that kind of formed the backbone of your foundation? Because, it's not everybody, and there is a stereotypical image of
Yeah,
Americans in particular that, their entire world, revolves around the United States. And, for good reasons or bad, but it's not very often that you hear stories of people
yeah,
venturing out beyond sometimes even their state, but then
that's
going,
right.
as far around the world as you have. That must have come from somewhere. It's a seed, a story, a
Sure.
narrative that was planted in you from the time
Yeah,
you were very young. Can you tell me what those stories were? And in turn, how are you doing
yeah.
that with Anthony?
Sure. So I think more than anything, it probably was things that I observed as I was growing up. My family life growing up wasn't the traditional nuclear family type of thing. My parents unfortunately got divorced when I was only 4 years old. So I don't really remember sitting around the dinner table per se and hearing those stories. But what I do remember is, being at home in Queens and having family members, because my parents were one of the first people to come over from their families to the US. And so they were the receiver of other family members. So when my aunts and cousins came from Haiti, they would come and live with us. Like the first landing pad would be our house. And I remember just being surrounded by lots of family gatherings, parties in our basements, so the music, the food, and just always remembering the happy times. People were always celebrating something, someone's birthday or what have you, and just getting the stories from those experiences and hearing about them coming over, and then watching people progress and like chase after that American dream and go on and reinvent themselves when they got to the US. And then throughout growing up, being with my mom as a single mother, I watched her and how she was resilient enough to keep going, even though from the divorce, she was a homemaker. And then she had to figure out how to pivot and how to create a life that was stable enough for my sister and I to make sure that we were still loved and cared for the best way that she could. So for me, the stories really came through my observing the world around me.
I love that. And how are you doing that with Anthony? I mean, he's been everywhere with you as well. So
Yes.
I think for him, it
That's
might
right.
come probably more as second nature than it might have, whereas you
Yeah,
might have had to adapt, but he's from the
that's
time he
right.
was a small baby, he had to adapt to
That's right.
different environments, right?
That's right. You're right. So Anthony started traveling with me when he was only 7 years old. So
Wow.
when I got the job with USAID back in 2010, I unfortunately had divorced his father, who is South African, and we left for our first post in the Philippines. So Anthony started, I think it was second grade when we were in Manila that he started there. And then he was in international schools until he graduated high school. So for him, I think for him, his whole worldview is of that, of living in different countries and learning new cultures and making friends wherever he goes. So for me, I think he's become a pretty adaptable and flexible human being because of that. He's very empathetic. He's not quick to judge, and he's easy to get along with. And so it's the world is also in his bones as it is in mine, because I took him along with me, and I would like to think that I also modeled that for him, of how we go, to different places, and also to show him how much we are the same, when even when people think we're different.
Absolutely. That's such a beautiful thing. And I think exposure is one of the best gifts that we can give our
That's right.
children.
That's
Yeah,
right.
especially in the increasingly multicultural world. I always say that the importance of telling our stories is because
Mm,
our stories are not our own. They
that's right.
belong to the collective. And in our
Yes.
stories are lessons that others can learn, you know, uh, viewpoints that they can adapt to and that can help them navigate their own
Right.
ups and downs.
Yeah.
When did you realize that your story was not your own and that
Sure.
you had to have the courage, because it takes courage, to
Sure.
share your story with the rest of us?
Yeah, it came about last year, honestly. This is not something that I had always been dreaming of or thinking about doing, to write a book at all. So, but over the years, I've had some friends encourage me, like, Jen, you should write a book. You go and live all these places. Like, people, especially American friends, think it's fascinating. And for me, I just thought it was everyday life, ordinary stuff, right? Because being a foreign service officer, that's your life. You keep just moving around and working in different places. But it wasn't until last year when, my world literally started crashing around me, where I was like, okay, what else do I have to lose? And a friend of mine connected me with a writing coach and editor. And I met this woman who was just brilliant, this woman named Maria, who I ended up working with. And she really helped me sit back, reflect, and realize that I actually do have a lot of stories to tell, and a lot of
Yes,
stories that could help others, inspire others, and motivate others, given my trajectory. So I didn't write it because I thought my life was necessarily an extraordinary thing, but I wrote it because I realized so many of us do carry invisible stories that could shape everything, and who it shapes who we become.
absolutely. And our stories are such a gift to others as well. And
Yeah,
you spoke about, this big transition, and it's something that you cover
yeah,
extensively in the book as well. And
mm,
so for those who are listening, who are
sure,
similarly going through a
mm,
transition like you have,
sure,
and are thinking, am I going to come out on the other end whole?
that's
And am
right.
I going to be able to pick up and create a new me? I'd
Yeah,
love for you to talk us through the process of recreation. I mean, I
yeah,
think human beings, and particularly women, are just incredible in being able to reinvent themselves,
right,
Um,
right,
and for me, that's God nature, to be able to think, I was this, I want to do that. And so, as
right.
a butterfly kind of coming out of our shell, what was your
Sure,
process of, of recreation? Because I would, I've gone through a couple of recreations, as we all do throughout
sure,
my life. It includes grief, it includes letting go,
that's right.
it includes a lot of courage,
Yeah.
it includes community, as we've spoken about before. What
Hmm.
was it for you?
Yeah, I think it definitely was the grief for me.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned last year, the same time that I lost my job with USAID, after the executive orders, early in the year, I also lost my mom, literally the same week when I received my reduction in force, email from the job letting me go. My mom literally passed away. And I was just like, my world was crashing, was crumbling around me. And the writing the book allowed me to then sit back and reflect, on my life, and remind me of who I am and where I came from. It also allowed me to honor my family, especially my mother, who you see throughout the book as one of the main characters. But I then also, knowing that I was losing this career, I wanted to honor the communities around the world that I also worked with, because there were some really negative things being said about USAID and the work that we did. what I knew about what I did was very different. So I wanted to honor those communities and shine a more positive light on the programming that we did, and also preserve some of those lessons learned that often get lost when careers end. And so the book in itself then became an act of healing for me as much as storytelling, to help me work through my trauma and grief over this past year. And then, like I said earlier, it then became this sense of newfound freedom. It was like, okay, so I'm not going to be this government worker anymore. Now I can really talk and say what's on my mind and do things that I felt constrained of doing before. Like you said, I'm a connector. I love networking. I love putting people together. And I love creating events and producing things. So it's like, okay, I could do like these fun, passionate things again now,
Mm.
without the restrictions.
Without the restrictions. That's
Mm,
awesome. And you're doing exactly that. Tell us about your mom. She is a central key character in the book.
yeah.
Tell us about what did you learn from her, and what would you consider to have been her legacy?
Yeah. So my mom definitely is a central character, and I dedicate the book to her. It's I feel like when with her passing last year, she also gave me the blessing to tell more of my story. And so throughout the book, I do detail about our growing up in New York with her as a single mom, and how she definitely was dealing with her own stressors, and how some of it was not always positive, right? Some of it, there were some negative addictions that she underwent. And I now realize that, she was going through a lot, and that was her way of coping. And so at the time, it wasn't great as a young woman going through that and not always having my mom available to me emotionally, or physically. But at the same time, now I realize, she did her best. She did what she needed to do. And there was never a time where I was lacking for anything. And so now, now I see her even more in the lens of a strong woman who did what she needed to do to support her family. And for me, that's just a great role model of resilience. And so that's why I was like, oh, yeah, this book is about her. And she made me the queen that she is. She instilled that in me and made me the queen that I am today.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because there's the play on words with queens,
That's
queens
right.
being, where
That's right.
you grew up, but also the
Yes.
queen of your life, which I
Yes.
absolutely love. I do want to touch on that. But just on the subject of motherhood, um,
Sure.
one of the things that this left me with, as I was reading your book, and like you said, your mom, like many women, had to do what they had to do.
Yes.
And there's almost like this narrative and story around to be a good mom and to be a
Mm,
good parent. You have to be present 24/7. You have to be the
right.
mom who bakes the cookies and goes to the ballet recital
Right.
and does
Yeah.
all the things, etc., etc. And what I love about women like your mom was that they chose what they could bring to their children that was of most value, and they just chose to not live in guilt about everything else, right?
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
and I
That's
think
right.
that's a choice that I've had to make as well in my motherhood journey to say I'm
Mhm.
not going be the mom at every ballet recital, and I
Right.
will buy the cookies and I will not bake the cookies. Um,
That's right.
because I'm busy, and that doesn't mean
Yeah,
I love you any less. But these are the things
exactly.
you can absolutely count on me for
That's
to
right.
show up for it as
That's
your
right.
mom, right? I will provide, I will do
Exactly.
this, I will do that. I'll be the person that has,
Exactly.
you'll have my ear if you want to talk about stuff, I'll give you advice.
Yep.
I just won't live the kind of
Yeah,
almost stereotypical culture,
that's right.
cultural understanding of what a mom should
That's
be.
right.
And
Yeah.
so, did you find that you carried that on in your own journey as a mom and as a woman?
Exactly. So even like now, you're right. Yeah, I'm not the homemaking mom who's going to be here cooking, baking cookies or anything like that. But Anthony knows he will be fed. He will be taken care of.
Yeah,
But then it was interesting for me how the roles then shifted, because when I became a single mom, my mom decided that she was going to retire early and travel with us. So my mom came with us when we started traveling the world, and she became Anthony's primary caregiver. So it was then I was able to see her in a different way, because all of a sudden she's like doting over this young boy, and I'm like, what about me? You weren't doing all this for me. But it was great. It was lovely to see that, because then she poured her heart and soul into him, and they became best friends. She did everything for him. And that also allowed me to do what I needed to do in my career. So I became the senior director and leader at USAID because I had my mom with me who could help take care of Anthony. So I for sure, owe everything to her in terms of that, in terms of giving me the space to be able to do what I needed to do, because she was taking care of home while I was at work. So yeah, it was interesting to see her, how she changed and flipped when the grandson came along.
absolutely. I love that. So tell us more about some of the other queens.
Yes. So growing up, especially, with my mom busy doing what she needed to do, I have my older sister. So she's definitely another queen in the story, which is Nancy. And you'll see her name throughout the book. So my older sister for sure was the one there who was helping me, combing my hair for school in the morning, or making sure I had the best outfit to go to school, and making sure, that I got on the right bus. And so even till now, my sister, she lives a 2-minute drive from me here, and we're as close as ever. And so she's definitely one of my best friends. And so she's definitely one of the other queens. And then the others are like cousins and aunts along the way. My godmother, who's also one of my aunts, my mom's sister, my cousins. I talk about my cousin Sandra, who's a doctor in our family. So I just had all these other beautiful women in my family growing up around, that I could aspire to and be supported by.
Incredible, incredible. And then you had Queens the Borough, um, that
Right.
that also raised you. What did you learn from Queen?
Yeah, no, Queens was great. I love it because that's where I was born and raised. So I always love it. But Queens itself, and it still is a melting pot, right? New York itself is a melting pot, but Queens itself has so many different diverse cultures and people that live in it. And at the time, I remember when we got moved into the house in Laurelton, my dad apparently like brought over like a lot of his friends to move near us as well. So we had family friends on our very block. And I remember there being several, not only other Haitian families on the block, but other Caribbean families or other African American families. And so it was just a really joyous time growing up in New York. And then I was, hopping around with friends, going to different parties and going out to Manhattan and going to the clubs and everything. And so growing up in New York just helped build up my confidence, because it's just so big and busy. And it's like you have to survive, or else you're gonna just wilter away kind of place. So I definitely learned the grit and the grind and the hustle from being born and raised in New York, in Queens
In
especially.
Queen. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, it's one of my absolute favorite boroughs. I mean, I'm a
Aw.
Brooklyn girl and I lived in Brooklyn, but
Yes,
hats off to
yeah,
Queen. I see what you're doing.
yes,
Um, I will say that, I mean, there are two kind of almost parallel things that speak to me when I look at your story. On the one
sure,
hand, it's kind of the immigrant story to America, right?
yep,
Like an immigrant
yep,
family coming to America, being born out of that
yeah,
context. The
yeah,
melting pot that is New York, where you grew up, and then the diplomatic path that you followed as a career, which also was very multicultural. Really the epitome or epitome of globalization, all in one
right,
person. When I
right,
think about it, I see that with you.
yeah,
However, when you fast forward to 2026, it feels to me sometimes like the world is going backwards.
mm,
And the I think the ideal would be to be able to raise children who have that kind of global mindset, and look at the world as a melting pot. But it feels like we're almost taking a step backwards. Do you? how does that make you feel personally in terms of, because you come from a completely different way of thinking to where more and more, whether in the United States or other places around the world, Europe,
Hmm.
and places in Africa,
Right,
where um, exclusion of diversity is
right.
something that we're seeing increasingly.
Yeah, especially this past year, right? And being in this, imagine me being back in the US during this time of all times.
The
You
whole
know,
time, right?
traveling and living abroad was definitely a big form of escapism for me. And so I didn't have to really deal with some of the issues head on. But now that I'm back and there's, the dismantling and destruction of any DEI program, it's like, oh my God. Then there's all the immigration backlash and deporting people. And it's like, whoa, it feels like such an attack. And it makes me feel really sad because it's like, are you kidding me? Like, we are this great nation because of our plurality, because of our multiculturalism. It's like we wouldn't be where we are without this. And this country wouldn't be here without all of this. So it does make me sad. And I do worry about our next generation because, like you said, I do see there's like this pulling back. Even with, Anthony and his friends. Anthony, I assumed maybe one day he would want to be this globalist too, like me, and he's kind of content with being home. So I do wonder, like who's going to take the charge after us. And that's why part of my journey right now is also getting more involved with speaking engagements with the youth. So I'm going to college campuses, I'm going to high schools, because I do want to try to inspire and plant the seeds in the next upcoming generations that don't despair, that you can make a difference, that your voices matter, and that public service is still a great field to stay in or to get into, because we need to be help to inspire them, because I do see there's some backsliding along those lines.
There really is. There really is. And we have to do everything that we can to enable the next generation of people because I
Yeah,
always say we can't do without each other as much as
right.
we
That's right.
try. You know, forces of nature are such that people are going to
Mm,
immigrate, they're going to intermingle, they're going to
that's right.
intermarry, they're going
Exactly.
to find better opportunities than they have in their own backyard elsewhere.
Exactly.
And so it's irreversible and
That's
it
right.
is human nature. And we've done it for since the world, came
Exactly.
to be. And
Yeah.
seeing this backwards trend is definitely something. But I do think that there's always an opportunity in a challenge in challenging times. And I'm hoping that it just helps us to be more introspective and we can take as many
Exactly.
people along as we can. Um,
Exactly.
so, but I mean, what has been for you the biggest lesson that you've learned? If there
Mm,
was something, you said you do a lot of, speaking engagements and
yes.
particularly for youth. What is that one thing that, really resonates that you've learned throughout your journey?
Yeah. With last year's shock of dismantling of USAID and everything, and losing that title, that job title, it was like, whew, okay. It reminded me that I am not my job title.
Yeah,
And, I was comfortable for a while with that, but now it's like, look inwards and realize who you are beyond that. And, so that was a big reminder. But other lessons is just that, relationships outlast the programs. So even though budgets will end, projects will close, governments will change, but when people know you've shown up for them, and if you approach it with humility and respect, that's how I approach different programs that I work on, those relationships will endure. And that human to human connection is something that people cannot destroy. And I do believe, having worked in international development for so long, that I always put people first, no matter what, in the programming. So those relationships will endure even if the programs end, etc. So the biggest lesson for me is to just respect everyone that you encounter, accept them at face value and don't judge, and to just be, humble and appreciate that you're allowed to have this connection.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, practically too, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit
Mm,
about some of the practical tools that you've actually used. So,
mm.
as you went through this valley and coming out of this valley and the things that you're doing
Yeah.
now, is it
Yep.
journaling? Is it meditation? I've just started meditating. It's actually, I mean, it's easier than I thought it would be, but it's
Yeah.
also hard, right? It's hard to find the time. It's hard
Yes.
to
Yeah.
it's something that you have to practice and that you have to learn. So I've started
Yep.
meditating,
Yep.
um, and I rely heavily on my spiritual practices to get me through. What gets
Right.
you through?
Right. It's exactly some of those things. So the last year, especially more so when I was in Bangkok before I left, I used to walk every day. I used to make sure that I get my 10,000 steps in. So for me, walking is a big thing. Getting outside into nature and just having some fresh air, even though it wasn't always fresh in Bangkok, but I put on a mask. But getting, out into nature. But then for me, it is actually meditation. That is my number one now. And I have it as part of my schedule, and not that I have to go into an office or anything anymore, but as soon as I wake up, that's like my first 10-15 minutes at least, is I just pop open a YouTube. I do a meditation before I even get out the bed. So I make sure I do that
You
every
don't
day,
check your
and it
phone
helps.
like some of us. You don't check your
Yeah.
phone first. Yeah,
That's right. I put it
yeah,
on do not disturb and silence now. That's
that's
a new
good.
trick.
Yes,
Because I am addicted as well to my phone. But I
yes.
do the meditation, and then I also do some stretching. As you might remember in the book, I have joint issues and I've been in accidents before. I've had surgeries. So I know I need to take care of my body in terms of the joints. So I stretch also right after my meditation. So that's kind of a ritual I have now every
Yeah.
day. Um, and then the writing, I don't journal as much. People do assume I journal because I have this book now, but I do read, different passages, and then I do listen to music. Music is like my number one, healing aspect is music. I love listening to music. So much so that I just created a soundtrack for the book, FYI. I created a
You
playlist on
did. Tell us
Spotify.
about that. Yeah.
I did. I would, some people have been asking about it as well. Like, oh, you should definitely, put music to this because I talk about so much music in the book and like different artists. So I literally sat down one weekend and went chapter by chapter. I reviewed the chapter to see, did I talk about any specific artists? And then I listened through and I remembered, and I was like, okay, during this time, I loved this song. So I went through and picked different songs that did match each chapter. And it ended up,
That's
it's like 150 tracks. It's a lot.
no way. Oh my,
I could have put a lot more, but I love it. I enjoy listening to it. I listen to it like almost every other day or something, but it's fun. So
that's
yeah,
amazing. So you have some back in the day stuff because your book
of
covers
course.
from like,
I have
childhood
like
to
Listen, I
modern.
have like LL Cool J, Around the Way Girl, to dancehall reggae, to the Haitian compa my parents used to listen to. So it's eclectic. It's very
Oh, that's such a
eclectic.
great idea. That's incredible. So we can
Yeah,
find it on Spotify, you said?
it's on Spotify and it's The World in My Bones, the soundtrack.
Incredible. Congratulations, Jen.
Thank
That's absolutely
you.
awesome. So my last question to you is what is there still to do? What work do you still have to do? And it could be internal work, it could be external work, it could be professional, but what
Yeah.
is the one thing that you really feel you need to focus on next and in your self-development?
Yeah, for me, I have lots of ideas. And so I'm trying to figure out how do I bring those all into some kind of cohesive umbrella or path for me. So I am thinking about maybe starting my own business or so, but I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. So I'm like, okay, maybe I need to take some classes along those lines. So I am looking into, or maybe get a business coach. So I'm starting to allow myself to be coached by others. So I'm signing up for some sessions along those lines. but I still see myself as serving. I'm a public servant, right? At heart, I love community development no matter where I am. But for me, I just see that the service today now looks different than when I was at USAID. My service is now going to be through writing, through speaking engagements, mentoring. As I said, I do want to do a lot more mentoring. And I'm volunteering. I'm on a board at a museum. I'd like to do maybe some teaching and helping people to really tell their own stories. People have been reaching out asking me about my book process because apparently a lot of people have ideas but not sure how to get started. And so I
Telling you, I
enjoy
told you
helping
to be
others.
encouraged. Yes.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, this next chapter is going to be a bit more creative, which is fun. And then, yeah, I'll keep evolving from here.
That's amazing. Jen, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so
Oh,
happy
thank
that you've
you.
taken the time to speak to me about your journey. Your book
Thank
is a gem.
you.
It's called The
Thank
World
you.
in My Bones, The Diplomat Queens Made.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about where we can find the book.
Sure. So I created my own website so folks can go to jennifererie.com and they'll find links there to buy my book, but it's available anywhere online that you get your books through Ingram Spark, through Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. I think I've even seen it on takealot.com in South Africa. So
Great.
someone has requested it. So it's there. So yes,
Yes.
it's available online everywhere.
Congratulations. You're an absolute
Aw,
inspiration.
thank
The way
you.
that you navigated this transition is very inspiring.
Thank
And I'm
you.
going to keep looking at what you do next and supporting. And I'm really honored to be part of your community. Thank you for taking the
Thank
time.
you so much. Of course, Mimi, and thank you so much again for having me and sharing me with your wide network. I really appreciate you, sis.
Absolutely. No problem. Lots of
All right.
love.
Take care. Ciao. Bye.